Hi, welcome to the October 4th meeting of the CNCF IoT Edge Working Group. Last I looked, we had kind of a light agenda, but members are welcome to do any late adds in the agenda notes document or just bring up anything you'd like to talk about verbally here. If we run out of listed items, we'll just turn this into free-form birds of a feather discussion. So anybody is welcome to recount anything interesting they've come across recently or anything they're aware of that's coming up that might be of interest in the realm of IoT and Edge. I put something on the agenda myself, which was activity at the KubeCon North America conference in Chicago in the first full week of November. One of the things I wanted to discuss was if we have people who will be there in person, whether there's any interest in having a face-to-face social event. Maybe we can either meet at a table at the standard conference lunch or go out in the evening for a snack or some drinks. I think we've done these before. Sometimes before COVID, they got fairly large, and we actually got sponsorship of these to host dinners or lunches. I know on behalf of my employer, there's a little turmoil because we're in the midst of a takeover. So it doesn't look like I'd be able to offer sponsorship of that other than personally. But maybe we can just have a verbal, I don't know, raise your hand or say something if you think you'll be there in person. I will be. Anybody else? Yes, Kate. I think that in prior meetings, a few other members have indicated they'll attend. But it looks like just a couple of us here on the call. Anyway, I don't know that we can make a decision based on a couple people, but just bringing it up there and maybe, Joel says he'll be there too. So, hey, I'd really like to get together because, it's not the same experience as a Zoom. So if people don't want to meet in the evening, we can just do it we'll communicate on Slack and maybe get together at one of the standard dining tables during one of the lunches on one of the days of the event. And let's try to do that. Number two is that this working group now operates underneath tag runtime on the CNCF. I think Kate is a little more familiar with this than I am because she and Dion set it up, but they are planning a day one event in the morning, and they are responsible for several of these working groups under the CNCF, and they are interested in having each of these working groups come and present at their activity. So we've got an invitation to do this. I think that Andy and Joel may be able to do this. I'm not able to because it actually conflicts with the Kubernetes on the Edge Day event that I am the MC for. So I won't be able to attend. I think maybe Kate is tied up in the WebAssembly event, but we're planning on having a presence there. The expectation of this presentation would be that you tell the working group the kinds of things we've been up to. So we obviously have that white paper, a few other things. So you would give kind of a summary report, and anything else you want to throw out there is fair game. I guess it's up to you if you're going to put the work into putting together a presentation. Just take your allotted time and cover whatever seems appropriate. And on top of that, it isn't fully organized at this point, but the tag runtime said that they'll be having a kiosk on the show floor running the full 3 days of the regular conference. So for those who maybe haven't been to a KubeCon, the day one is kind of an extra registration, extra cost add-on. And that first meeting I was talking about, a tag runtime, is part of that. Then the regular 3 days are the main conference sessions, and they have an exhibit hall with the paid sponsor exhibitors. They also have a kiosk area for open source projects, and they're going to have this tag runtime kiosk. And we attended a meeting last week for leads, and they said that they want to have presentations perhaps all day long on all 3 days running at that kiosk, and they'll have a sign up for this. The sign up does not appear to be ready yet. I went back at the notes, and I think they had a goal of getting that plan together by October 15th. So we've maybe got another week or so to go. But if anyone was there and wanted to present at that, I think there might be an opportunity. Now, I'll caution you that this isn't, I don't think it would be an appropriate venue for giving a sales pitch for your company or your organization's product or anything like that. It really has to be aligned with this open source IoT Edge working group. But with that said, there's probably a lot of things that could be covered if you wanted to give a talk on something that is open source by the CNCF's definition of an open source license, and has been discussed in this group at least once or twice. I think that would be appropriate for giving a presentation for anybody who wants to volunteer for that. Kate, do you want to add a little more color to this? Because you were at the same meeting as I was. And
yeah, I think just to set the scene, the booth is next to all of the Project Pavilion booths. So that's where it would be in the expo hall. And I don't know what the booth looks like. I don't know what the tech's like. So I think it's really just an opportunity to kind of talk about one of the projects that fall within the runtime tag. So, and then the other caveat to this is, like Steve was saying, they're very much unfolding this idea as it comes. So they might completely remove the idea, I could imagine. So just something to be aware of and that we can continue to give updates on. And then the runtime event on the first day of KubeCon on that Monday is within the schedule. So you should be able to find it, I believe. And beyond presenting like Andy and Joel, you could also just go participate. So the runtime tag within it has the WebAssembly working group. They're working on an AI working group, and it has the container orchestrated devices working group. So the one that's focused on device access in Kubernetes. So it's a lot of interesting people. So if you don't have plans for that first day, that would be a great way to spend it. I do think you need an all access pass is the side of that.
yeah, and we may be able to, I don't remember what adding on that day one event pass is. I thought it was somewhere between $100 and $300, something like that. But if that is an issue for you, we can ask on your behalf to get that sponsored by the CNCF, and they may be able to do it. What I don't think they would do is give you the full Kubernetes week-long pass. But if it was just a situation of adding on the extra day, we can certainly ask, and it's the sort of thing I've seen happen sometimes in the past. So it may be doable. Leon, I see that you in the chat said that you won't be able to make it because of visa issues, and you're in Asia, and you're talking about wanting to have a conference there. I think that there is a KubeCon China. Maybe it's already passed. I didn't go to it this year. And I've seen Community Days events, I think, on the calendar for Korea. There's been one in Singapore in the past. So those happen there. Another big conference for IoT and Edge in Asia is the Open Source Summit in Tokyo, which I believe is in December. And they have a lot of IoT and Edge related sessions presented there. It's a lot of them are on the automotive industry because of the concentration of vendors there that are interested in that topic. But I have been to it 3 times, and they definitely have general IoT Edge sessions going on there as well as automotive focused. So that might be a good conference to catch if you're free to travel in that general area.
Yeah, I can definitely look into that. I'll probably check if it's possible. Thank you.
I think for talking at it, I think the CFP's closed recently, so it's too late to present, but you
Yeah,
could certainly attend.
Yeah, I have applied for the CFPs, but on a different topic, like it's more on service mesh.
Uh-huh. Yeah, they have had service mesh talks there too, because I gave a talk there a few years ago at Open Source Summit in Tokyo on service mesh. So it was service mesh for edge locations joining VMs into a Kubernetes service mesh. So if you have a talk application there, you might have good luck on that.
Yeah, let's hope. It's more related to HTO, not IoT, but so hopefully, like, let's see. No idea.
Yeah, I think a number of the Istio developers are in that region too. So they had quite a representation of Istio people at that conference the year I went.
Oh, that's nice. That's fine. I hope I get in. Let's see. If I get in, then I can probably try. Much easier.
Okay, I think we've run out of written items on the agenda. So as usual, if any people on this call want to bring up any random thing that they've come across that's interesting, or anything you're aware of that's coming up, just unmute your mic and go for it.
I think that K2D IO thing was the latest that we saw in the Slack, the K2D.io thing.
Mhm.
So I plan on trying it out just on a Raspberry Pi probably and just see how it's. So I'll test it out. Like it's they're saying that it's for like edge devices, Kubernetes, and they have like run MQTT servers and few other things on it like Grafana and all, and it's still managed to like keep a lot of memory available. So I might try that out.
I'm just opening the link now, but maybe could you fill us in on what exactly that is?
So even I haven't like gone a lot with it, but I have heard of it in the past. It's more like a mini size Kubernetes distribution. So it runs on edge more efficiently compared to like things like K3s and all, I think. But I haven't tested it out, so I don't know exactly what it is like, what it is doing. But I intend to sort of like go and test it out.
Okay. So it looks like, I think I've heard of some of these before, and there might be more than one thing like this. Looks like this is sponsored by Docker itself, perhaps. And there's been a number of people who have come up with this idea that you would take a Docker runtime and implement at least part of the Kubernetes API on top of it, so that you're not really running a full Kubernetes cluster. You're running a Linux node with a Docker API, but it supports a subset of the Kubernetes API so that you could perhaps treat it like a Kubernetes cluster, even though it's not a full cluster. And it's a different approach. You know, we've had approaches to reducing the resource consumption of a Kubernetes cluster so that it can run in a resource challenged environment. So that's basically starting with full Kubernetes and trying to put it on a diet to lose some weight, and so that you could run it in these low resource environments. But an alternate approach would be to start with something that isn't Kubernetes at all, putting a facade on it so that for some purposes you could treat it as if it was Kubernetes, even though it may not pass, the full compliance suite. And it's kind of interesting. If I'm not mistaken, I think Podman at least have some features taking it towards Kubernetes, Jan, maybe you're more an authority on it than I am, but I know that they went down the path of at first
Yeah.
supporting Kubernetes YAML. And
Yeah,
I
they
don't
have
think,
the sorry,
We have pods,
sorry.
yeah. But
They have the
just
pod concept, right?
go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I fairly worked with Podman like when I started out with containers because they were rootless. So I know they have the pod concept, and they can also like do things like translate a Kubernetes YAML to a pod. Like recently they have done that also, and it also can like if you have a pod, you can just spit it out to a Kubernetes YAML sort of thing, and it works very well with the Kubernetes thing also. So yeah, I would prefer Podman over Docker here because it's rootless and it doesn't have like a API server running also. So I probably would use Podman in a like a very constrained environment, considering they have like Kubernetes related sort of things, networking wise.
so Leon and I were over on it maybe is so small, it's not fair to call it a chat, but Neil Cresswell of Portainer started a discussion over in kind of this.
Well, Steve, this is a Portainer project, as far as I can see.
Oh,
If you go to
okay.
the source and the blog. So
Okay, I just assumed it was Docker looking at the page since they gave a trademark registration acknowledgement to Docker, but okay. But yeah, that's interesting. Maybe we can try to get somebody from this project to give a presentation perhaps, because I'm interested in it. And kind of this general concept seems to make some sense to me. So anyway, so we'll keep that in mind. Has anybody else come across anything interesting lately? I know in our Slack channel we had a note on some activity on the robot operating system having a conference coming up, but I don't think we have any representatives on our call today.
Not directly from that. The one tidbit of Ross news I can share, however, is that, and it's a pure coincidence. I wasn't planning to discuss this at all, but it seems I picked the right T-shirt. So for many years, ROS 2 was based on the principle that you had some DDS-based middleware baked in. And for the last few releases, that by default, that middleware was Eclipse Cyclone DDS. But the project team a while ago started to explore alternatives because DDS has a number of, let's say, weaknesses that make it less than desirable, especially if you want to have traffic over the public internet and crossing across, from one network to another. And so they published, I think last week, a detailed report about their quest to find a non-DDS-based middleware for that. And the choice that they've made ultimately is to pick Eclipse Zeno for that. So that's the T-shirt that I wear by pure coincidence. But yeah, so if you are interested in ROS, I can fish the link where you can find more information. So while someone covers another point, I will put that in the chat. But definitively, this is a great accomplishment by the team. I know that the guys at Zscaler that are both behind Cyclone DDS and Zeno have been working really hard with Open Robotics and the rest of the ROS community on that. So anyway, so a bit of ROS 2 news there.
One of the challenges we faced with DDS in the past was it used multicast, which didn't work very well with our overlay networks. Will Zeno also be using multicast?
Not at all. So it's using a different mechanism, and I remember that I covered that in detail in my book, and I don't remember exactly how they are proceeding, but no, the discovery traffic, there's still auto discovery like you would find in DDS, in the basic peer-to-peer mode, but they implemented it differently in order to both avoid the use of UDP multicast and essentially to slim a bit the discovery process so that you don't waste a lot of bandwidth on that. But I don't remember the specifics. I would have to I would have to refresh my memory there.
Thanks.
Of course, in any case, one thing about Zeno is that it supports multiple transports. So not only TCP, but it will run as a layer 2 thing without the presence of TCP, or you can run it over QUIC, or you can, it can use various protocols in various network layers as the transport, depending on the needs, in fact.
So yeah, I actually been just exploring what's going on on the RF Edge side, including some Crano meetings. So I actually joined a couple of meetings, and so Tina, you probably already know Steve, that from RF Edge, she's going to present at KubeCon. And I told her that yeah, so she's interested in talking to the chairs, so Steve and Kate from this group. Hopefully, you can get in touch over the KubeCon, and at least my personal observation, there's actually a lot of things going on the RF Edge, but instead of on the foundation level, it's more a lot of things going on the actual project level, which on the foundation level doesn't seem to be very active, but actual project level is actually quite active still. They actually go into a lot of actual use cases, so-called blueprints. But I think in a way the RF Edge does, maybe I could be wrong. It seems that they don't have as much of visibility as the CNCF Kubernetes itself. So I think there could be, yeah, I think there's some more communication and collaboration between RF Edge and this group could be useful going forward.
Yeah, we'll see her. Tina will be at KubeCon North America as part of the Kubernetes on Edge Day event. And I think there has been some overlap. I know I've been invited to present in some of their online conferences before. So it just, the LF Edge hosts specific projects that fall in the general category of IoT and Edge. But I don't think they attempt to do kind of the broad coverage with kind of a cross-project user focus that we have going on in this group. It's more like they're hosting specific projects, and it's hard to characterize them. They've got a broad assortment of things living over there. Probably the most common topic is the telco related things like a Crano, but I think that they've got a number of other projects as well, so that they're hard to categorize, kind of like what Frederick has going on over in Eclipse Foundation, where you might need a map to guide you on, everything that's over there and what the focus is.
It feels like to me, basically one RF Edge, first I guess the RF networking and later on RF Edge spin out to be focusing on edge computing. So at first we're trying to build sort of telecom infrastructure. That doesn't seem to be true anymore. They have sort of, not completely, but have a foundation of the telecom infrastructure. Now they're going forward and trying to build applications on top of that infrastructure. And that's where there's overlapping. But I think, yeah, just like the CNCF Kubernetes, all the other Eclipse Foundation, all those projects really fits very well. I think the thing is how to map it more clearly on what's available on this side of the wall, so that RF Edge on that side can actually take advantage of that, and whatever they learned on the actual infrastructure building, that can be pushed back into this side of the wall to for maybe new cutting edge technology to that can be leveraged on in the future. For me, for example, I know CNCF. I sort of know the CNCF, some of the project already at least. But like for example, what's available on the Eclipse Foundation side? Like what sort of projects you can say Edge native projects? I think that will be an interesting list. I'm pretty sure the RFEdge folks will be also interested in.
Yes, certainly. And in any case, we are members of LFEdge, and LFEdge is members of our Edge Native initiative. So, it's not like we are doing this in our own corner, but to synthesize really, really briefly, what we have at Eclipse, apart from Zeno that I already discussed, we have two container orchestration solution for the Edge as open source projects. One is Eclipse IOFog. Many of you heard about it since Kilton Hopkins from EdgeWorks comes to this working group from time to time. And the other one is Eclipse Canto, which is a bit more targeted around the automotive industry and has specific features that have been developed from that perspective. But both are container orchestration based on a central controller, relying on the Docker or Containerd runtime. And IOFog can integrate optionally with Kubernetes if you have such a cluster in the neighborhood. So roughly speaking, if I talk about strictly the Edge-related projects, those are the ones. But of course, we have a full complement of protocol implementations and software update, platform for devices, and all of that. And well, it's all in the book. So, that's not true in the sense that the book just covers 20 or 25 out of the maybe 50 plus projects we have globally in IoT and Edge at Eclipse.
It'll be interesting. So other than the book, is there any public blog, or for example, the RFEdge, you probably already know RFEdge has a taxonomy table. I am trying to find it. So basically what they did is all the projects they have for Crano and a bunch of other projects, they have a very nicely very clear table to tell what's characteristic of each project.
So a kind of landscape.
Yeah, is there such a thing for Eclipse?
Yeah, but in our case, it's just that you need to have the URL to my overview deck, which is a public deck that I maintain and modify when we get new projects. So let me just slip the URL in the chat for you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Of course. And if you want to go over this in detail, Victor, happy to take this offline and just drop me your email address. I will provide you a link and we can book a meeting if you want.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Speaking of a landscape, I think it was last time or maybe the time before, there was some interest in that spreadsheet that you'd started to put together, Steve, of all of the different edge technologies. I'm still interested in sort of helping you with that, and if perhaps others are as well, because I know I don't have time to try them all. So if we could collaborate to sort of summarize what each one does, I think that'd be immensely useful.
Okay, so that spreadsheet is linked. Well, it's not in this meeting's agenda notes doc, but if you scroll down, you can find a link to that for those who are unfamiliar with it. And it's an attempt to put a comprehensive list of all the open source projects related to IoT and Edge. It's a little above 150 of them now, so there are a lot of them. And even that, there has been an attempt to pre-cull the ones that haven't been maintained in the last couple of years. So if we didn't put limits on it, I think there'd be north of 250 of these open source projects. But I actually went back, found the GitHub repo, and if nobody's done a check-in or PR in a couple of years, or if the product self-declared that it was dormant, then it was taken out of that spreadsheet. I think the next step is to actually attempt to add a column that categorizes them into groups, because it kind of shocked me at how many there are, and a group that just reading through the spreadsheet one line at a time takes quite some effort. There is a column that has a description of what the project is, but my goal on starting this effort was to try to do something I'd call an edge native landscape. And even that, if you look at the history of the CNCF, they started with this concept of a cloud native landscape, and going back 6 years ago when it began, it was a pretty useful, call it, I addressed it in printed form, but they had a web page and they attempted to give little territories of what this project was and what it did, so that if you needed a networking solution or a container runtime solution, you could go there and quickly find a list of your options. I'd almost contend that CNCF landscape got so big that it's really hard to use now, because they may be at several thousand projects. But within a scope, it's at least a good starting point. And I was kind of surprised that no one else had done it before. As far as I know, there really isn't a good comprehensive list of open source edge IoT and edge projects out there other than this. I did Google search, ChatGPT, you name it, to go hunt for these things. And I think this is the only one. And Rob, I'll take you up on that offer to try to take it to the next level, where right now it's simply a linear list. And I think dividing it into categories would help. You know, I would have divided it into categories myself. I thought that was, I'll just do it. How hard can it be? But it turns out that one of the issues is that some of those projects are kind of a catch-all that tries to address 4 or 5 different things. So it lives in multiple categories simultaneously. I'd almost was coming to the conclusion that we need a category of integrating platforms, if you will, that covers these things that are the jack of all trades, taking on the big picture with plugins, as well as the special focus things. And even categories like data communication need to be subdivided, because you've got things like kind of overlay networks that implement just standard TCP, UDP on top of an overlay network with some semblance of security or reduction in endpoints, and others that are very specialized types of communication like message bus or event bus, things like that. And to be usable, I think what I want to do is come up with this rendered in a way that serves the end user who has a problem they're trying to solve, rather than serving a vendor community that just wants to use it for publicity. Yeah, I want to try to live in the shoes of some user with a specific problem with certain characteristics that wants to go shop and compare on the tools that are out there. So I don't know. Any ideas on how that could be pulled off would be great.
First of all, I think it'd be great to maybe combine the knowledge of the RF Edge and this group and Frederick's Eclipse Foundation, all this knowledge and classification and basic taxonomy is probably the hardest part in grouping the knowledge at this point. What the RF Edge did for taxonomy, I'm still trying to find it. I don't post it somewhere. That seems to be a good way to do it. So what they did is, instead of just classify based on one single keyword, they have a bunch of category. I need to find it. I'll post it when I find it. I think that will be probably a good similar to just tell the multiple characteristics of a particular project and what they are. But to start with, we probably have to define, which is already known, but what is unique for edge computing when it comes to characteristic of it, functionality, and then make it more, group them into a smaller subset of commonly agreed upon standard for categorization. Let me find it. I'll post it. It should be somewhere.
And Frederick did help out composing that spreadsheet. It did a great assist, and I think it has good coverage and classification of the Eclipse Foundation projects. What I don't want it to be is the world doesn't need a 20th definition of what is edge. You know, we've got plenty of those, and it is not an attempt to say what is edge, or, you know, because you can't come up with one definition. It's different things to different people. So that's why I don't want to start with definitions of edge and then suggest lists of projects aligned with those definitions. I want it to take a problem approach. Like, I need data communication and I intend to send events, or I intend to send sensor readings, something like that. And then it points you to the appropriate projects. I think the world maybe has other solutions for those pigeonhole definitions of edge, but taking that problem-centric approach, if there's anything out there like that, I haven't seen it. So I think the world could use something like that.
Okay, Steve, what you just said is exactly what I wish it exists. Do you mind put that in the meeting notes as a starting point so we can add to that later on?
Yeah, sounds great. Go ahead and put that in the notes. Neil, I see you joined. Welcome. For those who don't know, Neil is CEO of Portainer. I think a couple years ago, he gave a presentation on Portainer here to this group. And by the way, it's been upgraded a lot since then. So you're welcome to do that again, Neil, at some future meeting. And before you got here, we had a little bit of discussion about K2D, but it was more like the sharing our condition of being relatively uninformed about it. Mm-hmm. And it seems like maybe you know more than we do. Someone suggested that is a Portainer initiated project. Is that true?
It is a Portainer project. It's one of my harebrained ideas. I have many harebrained ideas, and fortunate enough, I have a co-founder who enjoys helping me with code harebrained ideas. We as Portainer have been getting quite a bit of commercial success in Industry 4 projects, the IoT, and we are seeing a collision occurring between IT folk in a company's IT team and the Industry 4 market, which is predominantly OT people, operational technology people who have a lack of skills and understanding in IT concepts and technology. And the IT people wanting to push Kubernetes management constructs across the business, and OT people saying, what the heck is that? And having no real knowledge. And we tried to create a bridge between those two worlds. I like to think that IT and OT are like oil and water, and we are the emulsifier. And K2D's job, in effect, is to allow Kubernetes management toolings, Kubernetes constructs, manifests, Helm charts, GitOps tooling, whatever you like, to be used in an IIoT or even an IoT construct where it wouldn't otherwise normally be possible to run Kubernetes. Even the lightest weight Kubernetes distributions require 500 megabytes of memory, and a lot of the devices that are underpinning Industry 4 factories, PLCs, IoT sensors have only 512 megabytes of memory, if you're lucky a gig. And so we managed to create K2D as a way to run Kubernetes in 20 megabytes of memory with near zero CPU and near zero disk IO. And I've been very timid sharing it because I'm expecting the Kubernetes ecosystem to tear me apart for basically emulating Kubernetes. But as I've had more and more positive feedback, I'm starting to get a little bit more confident to seek feedback from the ecosystem.
Can I ask you a question? I conjectured that basically just taking a look at it without running it, it looked to me like this was an attempt to, traditionally people have taken Kubernetes and put it on a diet, things like KubeEdge and things where they try to get it to use less resource. But this struck me as an approach that goes, hey, maybe this isn't a real Kubernetes cluster, but if we implement a compliant API or a subset of the API, we can allow people from a higher level management perspective to treat it as if it is Kubernetes, even if it's not a full cluster.
Correct. 100% correct. We looked to put Kubernetes on a diet. There's no way that you can get it down that low. The resources you need to run it. I mean, we've got this running. We did all of our QA validations on a Raspberry Pi 0W, not even the W2. So this is the old ARM v6 device, which is slow as anything. We did all of our testing and validations on that. On that one device, that Pi 0, we were able to deploy Docker, deploy K2D, and then using Argo CD, we're able to deploy the Eclipse MQTT broker, Influx DB, Node-RED, and a few other Industry 4 stacks, and we still had memory to burn. And we weren't using anything in the way of any kind of resources, disk IO, anything. So it was basically a way to say, look, we can't slim down Kubernetes enough to run on this device. So what makes Kubernetes amazing? It's the Kubernetes API. So let's try and take the Kubernetes API as the input and translate that in real time to Docker or Podman commands in the back end without having to run Kubernetes per se. So it's Kubernetes without Kubernetes.
And it sounds like a great idea to me, Neil, but this question isn't to take a shot at it because I like this idea. I'm just curious, on a scale of 0 means that you're not API compliant, and I know you're better than that, and 100 means that you've passed the full Sonobuoy compliance test suite for Kubernetes. Where does this sit right now in terms of how much of the Kubernetes API is there?
A lot of it. So we already support deployments, PVCs, PVs, node port, host port, load balancer, cluster IP. We only support a single replica because you don't need any more than that. We do stateful sets. We don't do daemon sets, so we haven't emulated those. Again, it's an emulator, right? It's an emulator.
Yeah.
So we're
well, is the goal to even emulate multiple cluster nodes, or are you just going to have one node and that's it? Because in that case, if it's one node, some of these concepts like daemon sets maybe don't even make much sense, right?
Correct. We've also emulated the metric server, so we're able to pull the Docker stats in as metric server emulation. So it's pretty good. We haven't actually run the compliance test, and I probably will. No, from my experience with Portainer, where we tried to get compliance on the Portainer Kubernetes API proxy, it was difficult because the compliance test needs to run in the cluster, not against the cluster. And so that was a bit difficult because it runs internally, so therefore it can't see the emulation layer. But I would be, for the use case that we are stipulating, we are looking for 100% compliance for all of the things that you would need for that particular use case, managing a single node cluster. We will implement jobs, Kubernetes jobs, because jobs are useful in the edge as well. So we are looking to get 100% compliance on those things. We haven't implemented ingresses because ingresses don't make sense at that far edge. But if it does, we might look to implement a reverse proxy as an ingress layer. So
not only that, I mean, with the changes in API gateway, maybe it'd be a little late to the game to spend your money on this anyway. So, Kate, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, when I saw K2D at the beginning of this meeting, one immediate thought I had was because it's using Docker, you can probably use the containerd shim that's out there for running WebAssembly through Kubernetes. So that was a thought that came to my head. So I might try that on Friday to see if you can use K2D using normal deployment YAML formats with Kubernetes. And as long as you set up the containerd shim and run WASI on your system, I'd imagine that this also pairs up with running WebAssembly, which would make it even slimmer and probably even more fine-tuned for those industrial IoT and IoT scenarios. So it sounds like a really cool solution that might plug into some other solutions well.
Yeah, and we're happy to work on any more APIs that we need to enable that. That's pretty cool. That's really interesting that we've had other people pick it up and say, hey, this works really nice in a CI pipeline where we need to test our applications against a Kubernetes environment. But because K2D takes not even a second to spin up a virtual cluster. So we've had people introduce us to their CI/CD pipelines and then test their applications against us as a Kubernetes environment. So it is near limitless possibility. It's just translations.
Before you got here, somebody was curious as to whether this is an open source project. We went to the opening page and didn't see a link to a GitHub repo. So
There
maybe you
is a
can-
GitHub repo. It's under Portainer. I have made it. I wasn't sure to do it open source. I haven't made it fully open source just yet. The source is definitely there, but I'm still unsure what to do with it. It's a side project. I have no idea whether it'll even have a life beyond the beta. It's currently beta. It went through the alpha, now it's beta. And I'm just seeking feedback on it to say, is this a good idea or is it an absolutely terrible idea? Yeah, emulating Kubernetes is a terrible idea. We should just all together focus on slimming down Kubernetes further. I don't want to make something that people look at and say, what the heck have they done that for? So yeah, this has had the sum total of about 3 months of R&D into it to see whether it's a good feasible idea, and if it is, we'll keep going. If not, it'll die on the vine at beta.
Well, I'll volunteer to go hit your download link and check it out myself in my home lab. So my initial reaction is it sounds like a great idea, actually. So let's check it out. If you want, we don't have much time left today, but I'd invite you to come back to this group. We meet every 2 weeks. And if you like, you can give a demo and spend at least 30 minutes driving it around the block, and maybe we'll try to get a little advance notice out there to get a bigger audience, because I think that the members of this group are people who would be interested in this sort of thing. And even this concept, there's another group that might be interested too. Frederick runs an Edge group over in the Eclipse Foundation, and they have a number of open source projects. It's interesting that when you get to this concept of OT versus IT, that this also often comes about not just in the context of running containerized apps where two communities kind of have such different world responsibilities that they don't communicate well. But the other focus, I've heard that comment come out regularly, is when it comes to industrial automation sensor IO, where the people on factory floors and process plants deal with things like sensors that have known engineering units and units of precision and things. They spend a large amount of time cataloging these, but ultimately these collections of historical and live data need to reflect up into running IT world applications. And there are some open source projects that try to bridge this, that would take, catalogs of your industrial sensor IO and reflect them into more easily consumable event streams or time series data sources that could be consumed in the kinds of languages that are used in regular IT. And this tool might fit well into an integration with that as well, I think. Frederick, maybe you can expand on this, because I know that you've covered this IT OT concept before, and some of the Eclipse projects take this on.
Actually, it's funny. Sorry, Frederick, before you start there, one of our very, very large automotive customers who happens to be in the Eclipse Foundation, it was one of the people or one of the companies who actually originally spurred this idea. Who they were looking. They want to manage millions of very, very small devices. It's NXP semiconductor V6 devices, millions of them. And they were like, hey, it would be interesting using Kubernetes principles, but it's too small. So they were one of the inputs to this idea. And Frederick, you may know who I'm talking about.
Not exactly, because in my case, I manage the IoT and Edge programs, and we have a separate working group, the software-defined vehicle working group, where most of the automotive people congregate.
Right.
But let's say that I'm glad to hear that, and maybe if you're not sure where your project lives, that it could live among the rest of our happy little family of projects anyway. But yes, this OT versus IT conversation we see a lot, especially in our Sparplug working group, which is another technology which is relevant, I could say, to Edge, in the sense that many people will use MQTT in industrial automation and are faced with the truth that MQTT is great because you can publish anything anywhere, but it's bad because you can publish anything anywhere. So Sparkplug tries to solve this by essentially defining a standard topic format, a standard payload format, and stateful session management. So, I mean, that's you know, I could go deeper, but that's probably not worth it at this point. But especially in that working group, we see those topics surfacing because literally the people that are deploying Sparkplug today are ones that, let's say, produce flow computers or AC units for industrial use and things like that. And they needed an easy way to integrate with other systems and bring that data both to SCADA systems in the local environment and also to the cloud at the same time. And so since OPC UA can do the first one, but not go really easily to the cloud, then many people in industrial automation have had a look at Sparkplug recently, and it's got tremendous momentum.
Does Sparkplug run in containers, or is that the common way
It's
to
a
do it?
protocol that runs on the top of MQTT, so it will happily take your container, virtual machine, or whatever you have that runs MQTT.
So it sounds like potentially you could take like a K2D and combine it with Sparkplug and have Sparkplug address the cataloging of these data sources with, fair to say it's maybe self-description, so that, you publish something in a message or event bus, and it allows the higher levels to go see what's out there rather than just throwing random stuff at the wall and
Yes,
making somebody do a search for it.
Yes, you could leverage it in a scenario like that. And of course, if K2D is as slim as Neil says, and I'm quite sure I can take his word for it, then it means that you could deploy, for example, things like a 4DAC runtime inside. So 4DAC is a way to design your own custom PLCs. So it's an implementation of an IEC standard that defines function blocks and is both an IDE and a runtime written in C. So, typically you won't necessarily find containers running on PLCs and specialized equipments like that, but there are definitively benefits to that. So I could see an intriguing combination of the 4DAC Forte runtime and K2D on, next generation PLCs, for example.
Yeah, already we're seeing a huge uptake. One of our hardware partners, Wago Industries, their PLCs all now ship with Linux and Docker. Phoenix Contact ship with Podman. Weidmuller ship with Docker in their PLC. So when you order the PLC, you can choose proprietary or open. And if you choose an open PLC, it's Linux, it's Docker, and it's a soft PLC. So, and they're shipping more and more of their open PLCs than they are proprietary nowadays.
So how tied to a specific container runtime is the K2D in its current state? Is it specifically the Docker Community Edition, or will it work with Podman or some of the others?
It just needs the Docker API, so Docker or Podman.
Okay.
Nice.
It doesn't use Swarm, by the way. It just uses the normal Docker API. So it just loops back internally. It's actually got, we're going to be launching a new project website for it in the next couple of days with all of the internal architecture diagrams showing how the software works, because we've got a whole job engine behind the scene which takes the manifest, breaks the manifest into parts, and then deploys the container, takes care of the service in regards to port publishing, takes care of the creation of Docker volumes and emulates them as PVC. So once that's up, it'll make a lot more sense rather than having to trawl through the source code.
Just out of curiosity, I assume it's fully integrated into Portainer, which has what I'd describe as a UI for either a Docker runtime or for Kubernetes. Is it in its own category, or do you manage it with Portainer as if it's Kubernetes, or do you manage it as if it's a container?
So you would have thought that I would have made it fully integrated with Portainer, and should have. However, Portainer support for K2D was an afterthought, and so from Portainer you manage it as if it's Kubernetes. It's not its own thing. We just onboard it as a single node Kubernetes cluster. There's no no special treatment. When you deploy K2D, you can do -- Portainer agent, and we automatically deploy the Portainer Kubernetes agent. So as far as Portainer is concerned, it's a Kubernetes cluster, and again, it's Kubernetes. Why should we treat it differently?
Okay. Well, I guess that's a good testament to it implementing a pretty decent subset of the Kubernetes API then, if you can just do it out of the box and manages it as if it's a Kubernetes.
Correct.
I wish Andy was on the call because he's got a project that is kind of federation of Kubernetes nodes, and I'd be curious, maybe he's not even aware of this, but whether it would work with that as well would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we plan to consider things like operators, CRDs later, and RBAC at the moment. RBAC is we just emulate a single user role, the cluster admin. So that, there are some restrictions, but there's lots of room for potential.
Okay, we're running out of time. We've got a couple minutes left to wrap up, but if anybody's got any last remarks or adds, go for it now. And Neil, once again, I'll throw out the invitation to let's carry on with this because I'm interested. I think more than one person on this call is, and it might be a subject that deserves a little more time allotted to taking a look at it.
Yeah, I'll be at KubeCon as well, and we'll be showing it off there.
Okay. One thing we threw out at the top of the hour in this meeting before you arrived at KubeCon, we were kicking around the idea of trying to get together for an informal face-to-face. We've done it in the past before COVID. And if you'll be at KubeCon North America, we'll probably, at a minimum, we'll pick one of the days of the event and meet together at a lunch table at the standard conference lunch. But maybe as an alternative, we could pick some evening and just go out and share a meal or a drink in the evening. But yeah, please keep in touch if you'll be there. It looks like we've got 5 or 6 people at least known to be going so far. So.
Yep, I'll be there for sure. We've actually booked a suite in the hotel next door to have any kind of off-event lunches or meetings or whatever else. So that's available too if you want it.
Okay. Okay. That sounds great. Let's keep in touch. Okay. So thanks everybody for coming. I'm going to call this to a close and we'll have another meeting in 2 weeks. So see you then. Thanks for attending.
Thank you.